Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery after so long. We're back after our winter retreat, and this is not Bhante Sudaso, but he has not changed after 2 months, 3 months of intensive meditation practice. But it's our good friend, Kalyanamita Bhante Jayasara, who is currently visiting here at Empty Cloud Monastery. And I'm Aya Soma, for those who don't know me. And hello to Faizi and Vidura and to everyone else who's tuning in. So tonight we're going to have a little discussion, Bhante and myself, on a sutta that we'll be reading. And the subject is going to be the decline of the Dhamma. Oh. But before we start discussing, before we start reading the sutta, I'll invite Bhante J. Can we call you Bhante J?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll invite Bhante J to guide us in meditation practice.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
All right. Set yourself up in whatever comfortable and stable posture works for you. We'll take a few minutes to just briefly scan through the body, starting from the feet, going up to the head. And as you do so, going through each part, moving up, check and see how that part of the body affects your posture. And also check to see if there's any small feelings of discomfort or pain. If you find one, now is the time to adjust your posture and move around. We want to try to set our body up before each meditation in a way that will allow us to sit for longer periods without moving and without discomfort. Bring your awareness through your feet into the ankles and calves. If you're having trouble finding any sensations in the part of the body you're scanning through to contact with, you can prompt yourself by asking, what do I see? What do I feel? Move through the knees to the thighs. What is the feeling of the thighs pressing against the cushion or the chair, the couch? Bring your awareness to the pelvis and hips. Check to make sure that your sits bones, the buttocks, is evenly distributed on the cushion. This can be a major issue for stability in your posture. Check to see how the position of the pelvis affects the spine, causing the upper body to lean and slouch. And now move up the spine through the abdomen to the chest. Up to the shoulders, checking that they're hanging loosely, not scrunched up and tight. Move down to the elbows and hands. Observe how the position of the elbows and hands affects your posture. And finally, up to the head, checking that the chin is parallel to the floor, that the head is not leaning and slouching left or right, back and forth. When you've set up your body in a comfortable and stable position, let the body go and take 3 deep silent breaths. And then let the breath go. From here on in, try not to manipulate or control the breath in any way. This body has been breathing from the moment you were born and will continue to do so until the second you die. It doesn't need you to do its job. Your job is to simply observe, investigate, and abide with the breath. Stay with the breath as this body breathes in and breathes out. As you follow the breath, the mind will become bored, will seek to run away to the past or the future, across the world or the universe. Or an external distraction will arise, and the mind will chase after it. Whenever you become distracted away from the breath, you'll start to realize very slowly as your mindfulness returns that you've been taken away. At that point, fully acknowledge and recognize that you've been taken away from the breath. Then practice letting go of the distraction by neither getting agitated and pushing it away, nor by getting excited and attaching to it. Simply try to let it go and give it no energy. When you let it go, it will move on and then cease just as it arose. And once you've let go, gently return back to the breath. Whenever you get distracted, acknowledge, let go, and return over and over. Acknowledge, let go, and return. Every once in a while, check in with the state of your mind. Is your mind becoming more tranquil and still or not? As your mind becomes more tranquil and still, you may begin to notice more subtle characteristics of the breath. Sometimes the breath is long and deep, sometimes short and shallow. Do your best to try to observe the changing nature of the breath, how it's a little different each time. Slowly open your eyes, become aware of the room around you and accustomed to the external world again.
Thank you, Bhante, for guiding us in meditation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And welcome to some friends who have joined us in the meanwhile. Hello to Sud, Yaneshwar, Niranjan, Michael, Jayanta, Venerable Gyanaratna, good to see you.
Oh.
And Beo, Janaki, how do you pronounce?
Nguyen?
Oh, Janaki, not Janaki. Oh, all this time I was calling you Janaki in my head. Janki, but I've been corrected. And Patricia, Mong, and Venerable Khan, good to see you. Hello, Mary. All right, welcome, friends. And we can proceed by reading a sutta, Guttara Nikaya 6.14, the Kimbila Sutta. And as we read, then maybe actually we can read it all and then discuss it.
Okay.
How's that? But before we proceed, we can start by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, the reason why we're all gathered here today. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. So I'm reading from the translation of Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. And the sutta begins, thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Kimbila in a Nikula grove. Then the Venerable Kimbila approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side and said, what is the cause and reason why, Bhante, the good Dhamma does not continue long after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana? Here, Kimbila, after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana, 1. The bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male lay followers, and female lay followers dwell without reverence and deference towards the teacher. 2. They dwell without reverence and deference towards the Dhamma. 3. They dwell without reverence and deference towards the Sangha. 4. They dwell without reverence and deference towards the training. 5. They dwell without reverence and deference toward heedfulness. 6. They dwell without reverence and deference towards hospitality. This is the cause and reason why the good Dhamma does not continue long after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana. And then the sutta ends with the question, what is the cause and reason why, Bhante, the good Dhamma continues long after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana? And the Buddha replies, here, Kimbila, after the Tathagata has attained final Nibbana, the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male lay followers, and female lay followers dwell with reverence and deference towards the teacher. They dwell with reverence and deference towards the Dhamma. They dwell with reverence and deference towards the Sangha. They dwell with reverence and deference towards the training. They dwell with reverence and deference towards heedfulness. And they dwell with reverence and deference towards hospitality. This is the cause and reason why the good Dhamma continues long after a Tathagata has attained final Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Well, pretty straightforward sutta. So maybe we can rewind from the very beginning. And maybe I'll invite Bhante to begin his thoughts. Preliminary thoughts.
Well, this is very clear. What this reminds me of, this is all about the Fourfold Assembly. And you see in the suttas, where the Buddha talks about in many places, and the first time Mara comes to him after his awakening in Mahaparinibbana Sutta, where the Buddha talks about how the Dhamma will last as long as there are bhikkhunis and bhikkhus, laymen and laywomen who are learned, right, who practice well, who know the Dhamma. And what this sutta is saying is the opposite. So it's saying, well, once the fourfold assembly starts to rot, starts to become lax in the training, and keep in mind, this is not just talking about monastic training. This is the Dhamma training. This is the Noble Eightfold Path. This is for the fourfold assembly. All four of us. Right? Oh, well, when we started, the fourfold assembly was here, but now Anagarika Jans is gone. But now we have the threefold assembly in this room right now. But the fourfold assembly lives in this place, an empty cloud, and the fourfold assembly lives on my online community because it's so important. We have to have the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis, lay women, lay men, all together, all skilled, all knowledgeable. And that's how we keep the Dhamma alive. When we let that go, then the Dhamma starts to fall apart.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante, for that reflection. It brings to mind also, in fact, one of the things that the Buddha says over and over again throughout the suttas, that he will not leave, he will not depart. He refuses essentially to attain paranibbana before actually he had learned, is that how you say it in English?
Mm-hmm.
Learned, both ordained and non-ordained, male and female followers. So these days we can also add transgender followers for the sake of inclusion, because pretty much anyone, regardless of their physical body, can practice the Dhamma. So it's not that the body gets awakened. The body is just a means to an end that makes life a little bit easier to awaken. It's pretty convenient. Since I've hurt my body actually in November, I started really appreciating this body. It can be really, really useful for meditation practice. So yeah, sometimes we start relating to the body in a very unhelpful way. So identifying with it in really not useful ways that are conducive towards awakening. But when we actually just notice how it's or acknowledge how it's a vehicle towards awakening, so it's very difficult to do mindfulness of the body without a body, for example. And there's lots of practices, obviously, that the Buddha encourages us to develop in mindfulness of the body, and also in just developing a mind that is still. Samadhi practice, when the body starts not working terribly well, it's very difficult to stay still, to stand still. Actually, during this winter retreat, I had to do a lot of sitting meditation on a chair. Extremely difficult. I had not realized how much easier it was to sit cross-legged. Than it was on the, I remember going with Bhante Sudhasa actually to this Zen monastery upstate, Daibosatsu, and the abbot there is a really wonderful female Zen priest, and she was, giving instructions when we were there. It was like a sort of semi-retreat situation, and she was giving instructions to both monastics and lay people on how to practice meditation. Of course, just like Bhante started guiding us, in the posture, she was going like, so the easiest position is the lotus position, and then kind of going all the way to the most difficult, which was essentially sitting on a chair. And I thought at the very beginning she was being ironic. And I still actually was until February of 2022 when I had to sit on a chair, and I was like, wow, this is really difficult. It's really difficult to have a stable mind. So we can, just a reflection on the importance of the body, of thinking of the body in terms of, right now it's working all right, or even if it's not working out right, it could work worse. So we should make the most out of the conditions that we have right here, right now. And yeah, so obviously in the beginning of the sutta, the first reason that the Buddha gives of the decline of the Dhamma is how the fourfold assembly dwells without reverence and deference towards the teacher. And obviously the teacher is the Buddha. So maybe Bhante, can you share some reflections on what that is all about?
Well, one of the things that I was taught, when I started sharing Dhamma with Bhante Gunaratana of Bhavana Society as my preceptor, he's the one who ordained me. And one of the things that he always said was, remember that you should teach what the Buddha says, not what you say. And that has always kind of stayed with me. And that's why, like when I do my own live streams and stuff, and if nobody has any questions, I usually just read a sutta, so that they can hear the words of the Buddha directly. I mean, I can expound on things, and I could give a talk if I wanted to, easy. And of course, I do bring in my own meditative experiences and, to help people understand and things like that. But I always keep in mind that the teacher is the Buddha. Even Bhante Gunaratana, who's very, very famous, well-respected Dhamma teacher. And I remember one retreat where he says, I'm not the teacher. And he pointed to the Buddha, the rupa behind him. He says, the Buddha is the teacher. He says, I'm just a Kalyanamitta. And he said, and the Buddha says he's the best Kalyanamitta. Right? So this is something that can get lost, because in Buddhism, in many places, and there can tend to be this kind of guru-ness that arises, where like, oh, the teacher, this teacher, this monastic or whoever, this is the teacher, this is who we listen to. And it's, obviously we need wise beings who are alive today who can share the Dhamma with us. But on the other hand, we have to make sure that we keep the perspective of, well, what does the Buddha say? And we say, okay, my teacher says this. Let me look in the suttas. Let me see what the Buddha says, and let me see how in line that is. Right? And if it's in line, then you say, okay, my teacher, whoever is teaching in line with the Dhamma that the Buddha has put down. And if not, then you say, well, what's going on, and who should? So for me, whoever monastic or whoever that I will hear the Dhamma from, I will always compare that to what does the Buddha say. And I know that the teachers that I look to as role models and who I can trust their Dhamma, I know that they don't need to be sutta masters, that they know every inch of the sutta, but at the very least they understand the teachings from the suttas well enough, and from the Buddha, that even if they talk about things in their own way, it's still in line with the teachings.
Thank you, Bhante. Yeah, very important. In fact, we see that also afterwards, the Buddha talks about the Dhamma and the Sangha, and it's all pretty much interconnected. And we see also in traditional Buddhist countries how there's a huge emphasis, obviously, also in skillful means and how to develop devotion towards the Buddha. Obviously, first and foremost, we have representations of the Buddha, which are quite helpful. So to do also what Bhante was suggesting. So, for example, we bow multiple times. We like to bow a lot in in Buddhism. And why do we do that? Maybe at first, if we're converts, we can be a little bit weirded out. Like, what are these people doing? Bowing to these inanimate objects, statues that sometimes look like a person, sometimes look like a deformed person. We can get very cerebral about it. But it's actually a practice first and foremost of humility. and also of understanding, once again, as Bante was saying, that this is not, then when we also as Sangha members or as like lay people, when we start talking about the Dhamma, and actually the Dhamma has this incredible, sort of sweet taste that can evoke many emotions in the people that can hear it. We don't make it about ourselves, but we understand that it's actually something that we have inherited, and that we are part of a long lineage of both monastics and lay people who have preserved these teachings, but that they ultimately come from our original teacher. So in this case, Shakyamuni Buddha, but also a legacy. So it's not that the historical Buddha created anything, but rather he discovered it, just like Buddhas before him and Buddhas who will come in the future. And it's very humbling, actually, when we start reflecting that we have inherited this precious treasure, this precious gift. And the act of bowing is really an experiential reminder. At least I experience it this way every time, bowing to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, not once, but 3 times to the triple gem. Not 1 gem, not 2 gems, 3 gems. We're really lucky in Buddhism. We're pretty rich, right? But yeah, always working to create the conditions also to understand that it's not about us, that we don't take something that is so beautiful, that we take these gems and we think that we created them, that it's all about us, but rather that we found them somewhere and that we're part of a larger legacy. So yeah, this part of I think, once again, skillful means obviously then the recollection of all the incredible qualities of the Buddha, which, by the way, make also meditation practice much more pleasant and happy and easy. It's a nice primer of the mind to recollect how great the Buddha is, with perfect conduct, perfect knowledge, incredible. Yeah, everybody's nodding here because we recollect all the incredible qualities of the Buddha every morning. And it's like, yeah, it was not just some ordinary person. Actually, he started as an ordinary human being, but became exceptional. And then gave us the inheritance to become exceptional beings as well, divine beings as well, here and now. Isn't that wonderful? So you chant, you recollect all the qualities of the Buddha, and you can recollect all the qualities of the Dhamma, and recollect all the qualities of the Sangha. So all the beings that have practiced the teachings of the Buddha, have practiced the Dhamma, and have become Buddhas themselves, Anubuddhas. So Buddhas following another Buddha, the teachings of another Buddha, which is difficult as it is. So that's also very humbling, right? When we start practicing, we're like, wow, it's hard to practice the Dhamma while having the Dhamma. Can you imagine doing it from scratch?
Yeah.
Wow, don't want to go there.
And one thing also that I think is important is the Buddha is a role model in many ways. And the Buddha, in the case I'm going to bring up, is when after the Buddha becomes awakened and he says, it's good to pay respects. It's good to have something higher than you. And the Buddha says, well, let me look in the world and see who is higher than me. And obviously, he couldn't find anybody higher than a Sammasambuddha, the Tathagata. So he says, I know this Dhamma is higher. So Buddha, even a Buddha paid respects to the Dhamma, right? Somebody who's higher than you. And even a very, very senior monastic. I've seen somebody who's been a monk for 40 years, but then there's another senior monastic that comes, and that very revered teacher bows and pays respects to this teacher that's more senior to them. Right, so this is a role modeling a behavior that is conducive to development, that's conducive to the practice, right? That is conducive to the long life of the Buddhasasana in the world.
Yeah, thank you, Bante. And this, cultivating this reverence and deference is very supportive, because then we understand once again the preciousness of the triple gem, and we don't distort the qualities of the Buddha. We don't distort the Dhamma. We don't pick and choose. Oh, I like this, I hate this, and actually I found this outside, so I'll pretend that it's the Dhamma. And also we don't distort the meaning also of the Sangha. It's actually these days, especially here in the West, where we have inherited, this tradition from the East. Sometimes there's some really awful, incredible distortions. I was reading some newsletter that I received actually from a place where they're talking about the Mahasangha, but completely misusing that word. So it wasn't anymore the Mahasangha and intended as the ordained supreme Sangha, but rather it was completely distorted in terms of lay teachers that weren't part of your immediate affiliation. And I was like, wow, how, interesting how the mind can work, where we start appropriating things that don't belong to us, and start creating new meanings that then are for the opposite of the benefit. the benefit. How do you say the opposite?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The de-benefit.
The de-benefit? Oh, no, I don't know about the I don't know.
The opposite of benefit.
Yeah.
The demerit.
Yeah, demerit's good. Yeah, I was thinking.
Of the merit of many beings. Yeah, it's really intense.
The opposite of benefit, you could say the harm.
Yeah,
that's
for the harm. Yeah, of oneself and others. So we can tend to take things very lightly if we don't develop a mind that is humble. And instead of a vehicle for awakening, it can become a vehicle towards hell realms here and there and in the future. So very important to pay attention, not that we're not doing something so harmful.
Well, I was talking about the sangha. It's important to remember what this sangha is that we're taking refuge in the triple gem, and that sangha just means a group. So you could say I'm going to work to my sangha, which your business that you work at or something like that, right? But it means something more. We have the bhikkhu sangha, the bhikkhuni sangha. But the sangha that we have in the triple gem is the Arya sangha. These are women and men, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, who have attained at least sotipanna, stream enter. Right? So this is not just any average, Jane or Joe bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, right? That you're going for. These are role models, people who have followed the Buddha's teachings, who have practiced the Dhamma, and who have attained at least the first stage of awakening. Right? These are people who have gone, we're on the path, and they're people who have gone ahead of us. Right? A lot of people can't, because of this views that we have of the Buddha as this kind of supreme human being, people can't really kind of connect with the Buddha. But you can think of, Bhikkhuni Patachara or Mahakassapa, or you can think of like the disciples of the Buddha, or those who we think who have become awakened, since maybe like modern days, like Ajahn Chah or something like that. We can look up to them as role models, right? And so that's what that is for. It's the teacher, the teaching, and those who have attained distinction from those teachings. Those three, that triple gem, is what allows us to stay on the path and progress on the path.
Thank you, Bhante. Yeah, this being said, though, it's also important, whether we're monastics or lay people, to remember that actually even the conventional, so to speak, monastics are a representation of the Arya Sangha. So sometimes we tend to relate, and I think it's actually very much connected to what you were saying earlier, that we're constantly seeking a guru, right? So then we forget about the Buddha, we forget about the Dhamma, we forget about the Sangha, and we relate to monastics, individual monastics, or even lay teachers as individuals. So that one is worthy of respect. The other one is not worthy of respect. And I like this one, but I don't like that one. And what we're doing is actually creating a lot of essentially bad karma of unwholesome mind states. First and foremost, because we're probably unenlightened. So our ideas of what enlightenment or what an enlightened being can look like can sometimes, be a big fabrication. Personally, at a certain point, I remember realizing that my idea of an enlightened being was essentially Queen Elizabeth. And it wasn't, something that I had formulated, but I remember I was watching a video actually on YouTube of Ajahn Mahabua, who's reputed to be enlightened, and my mind started creating all sorts of defiled thoughts, going like, I don't know if like that really is an enlightened being, da 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 da. And luckily, Sati came in, and I was like, stop that right now. For those who don't know, Ajahn Mahabua was actually, because he's passed away, very incredibly talented, skilled bhikkhu from the Thai forest tradition that was reputed to be enlightened. Actually, he said as much himself. And so, by watching that video, I had to deal with the question, what do I think? What is an enlightened being like? And then I started thinking, an enlightened being speaks like this and acts in a particular mannerism. And so all of these things are, dependently arisen, culturally arisen. So then another person, perhaps in another part of the world, will have a different. And I was not raised in the UK, but in Italy, apparently, we look up to the Brits as this sort of idea of refinement, I guess. We have a sense of inferiority towards the British because we're all loud and we gesticulate, as you see with Aya Soma. But usually, when we had Aya Brahmavara here, she was a lot more poised and calm naturally. So we have to kind of also question and doubt our minds, and instead of relating to monastics, once again, with that one I'm more reverent, and with the other one, who cares? Instead, we develop actually how we see in the suttas. If I remember correctly, it's Uga, the householder, who is a non-returner, and he's there kind of like the Buddha, roaring his lion's roar, like being a non-returner and going like, I have like so many wonderful qualities of my mind. And one of them is actually that even though he has the power to see the minds of the bhikkhus that he's offering food to, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, so the Sangha, and also devas come and tell him, hey, look at that monastic has this attainment, but the other one actually their virtue is really bad, and they're not that particularly good. And Uga, the householder, is like, my wonderful quality is that I actually give the same amount of food and the same type of food to each one of them, and I treat each one of them courteously. And then another wonderful quality is that whenever I meet a monastic, if they give me a Dhamma talk, I will listen to them. And if they don't give me a Dhamma talk, then I will give them a Dhamma talk to them. But even though he's essentially a non-returner, so he's saying, regardless if like someone is, not attained, so he doesn't go with the, hey, I'm the non-returner, I'm the one supposed to give you a Dhamma talk, but rather, developing that reverence towards the Sangha as the symbol of the Arya Sangha. And then out of compassion, giving a Dhamma talk to the monastic, because being a non-returner, very incredible non-returner, he has the understanding of where they are on the path. So these are all like examples to look up to, and how we should, what kind of qualities of mind are helpful along the path, and what kind of qualities of mind we should be developing. And we can then start seeing that, yeah, pretty much this is a practice of humbleness. I think actually Bhante Sumita that was here, this lovely Sri Lankan senior Mahatera monk, he was saying how, why we sit on the floor? So we don't fall off. So most of this practice is a practice of humbleness rather than of arrogance, and my jhana is bigger than yours, or like I've got this attainment, or I have the business card, arahat. But something much different. And that's why there's here over and over again, reverence and deference, reverence and deference, reverence and deference.
Yeah, the Sangha is very important. And I think a lot about Buddhism growing in the West and things like that. And, I remember I was having a discussion online on a Buddhist forum. And I said, talking about the Fourfold Assembly, and I said, without monasticism, there's no Buddhism. And a lot of people didn't take too kindly to it, but it's very clear, right? Monastics are, part of the Fourfold Assembly, part of the group that keeps the Dhamma alive in this symbiotic relationship between monastics and lay people. And, without lay people, then monastics couldn't be monastics. Right? So it's not just that it's just the monastics, the most important, but both teams, are important to keep the Dhamma alive. Right? The monastic, people will ask me something like, should I know Pali? As a layperson, should I study Pali? And, in answering this question, I thought, well, it's a lot to ask a layperson to like become fluent in Pali. And maybe it's better to like teach somebody the Dhamma in their own language, but monastics should keep this ancient language alive, right? It needs to be kept alive. So there's, and I think what I was bringing up about thinking of monastics as this Sangha, the whole Sangha, who the institutions that exist in the Buddhist countries and the the groups of monastics, that's part of what they do is they their job is to have the freedom to practice and study and to keep the Dhamma alive, both in the scholastic and also in the wisdom aspects of the Dhamma. And that doesn't give lay people an excuse to not do the same. As the Buddha says, all the groups are supposed to be wise and skilled and practiced. But for for monastics, it's a good thing not to, what you'll see is, people will think, oh, this one, everybody says this one's the Arhat, so I'm just going to listen to this one. Right? I'm just going to learn from this one, or I'm just going to give to this one. And what will happen a lot is if there's a famous senior monastic, people will come and he'll have, or she'll have, they'll have, 15, 20, whatever, more junior monastics, but the people will only want to give to the senior monastic. Of course, you know what happens after the lay people leave? The senior monastic gives it all to the junior monastics, because what is the senior monastic going to do with all of these things that were given to, is only one person, and they're usually pretty humble, right? They don't need all these things, so they give it to the rest of the Sangha. So it's important to I think I was giving good wisdom there in being trying to be as unbiased as possible in making sure, thinking of the Sangha as a group that needs to be supported and needs to survive. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and I would also say that it's true that monastics can't be monastics without lay people, but also lay people can't be lay people without monastics. And essentially because the Buddha created the fourfold assembly essentially to have a symbiotic relationship. So a lot of these rules, I have to say, by practicing them, they are so inconvenient. And sometimes you're like, why am I, practicing these inconvenient rules? It's definitely not for my benefit. And you start understanding that the purpose that some rules, the reason why they're there is actually out of compassion for lay people. It's not, they don't make our life easier. For example, not cooking our own food, rather not making our own food, like offering, etc. That we always have to have an unordained person offering us the food. That's really inconvenient. If you see, in fact, the majority of non-Buddhist monastic orders, they're completely independent from lay people. They are doing quite great. We would love, just spending time, at least I would, like really great, making the food that I like, shopping the food that I want to do, like in the garden, etc., cooking at the time that I want to cook, and eating the things that I want to eat, etc., etc. But instead, because everything has to be offered every single day, there is constantly a relationship with lay people. And so lay people have the opportunity to make what we call merit, punya, which doesn't mean like, oh, these people are completely incompetent and helpless and, in a state of precariousness, which usually is how we intend also charity. In the West, usually it's like I have a lot and these people have very, very little. So out of my kindness, if I feel like it, I will give them some. But rather, it's actually developing a mind of caring, a mind of wanting to give with no sort of conditions attached. A mind that gives because mind understands that, as the Buddha says, it's an ornament of mind to be generous. It's the most beautiful thing that one can do to beautify themselves. It's not putting makeup on. It's not having a Chanel bag. It's not having the Dolce & Gabbana dress. I used to work in fashion, so excuse my references. Or the latest, whatever car, or I don't know, what are the non-fashionable, well, that's also fashion.
The fastest computer to play the best games.
There you go. Yeah, that doesn't make you cool. But actually, a mind that is generous, for example, makes you cool. And cool as the ultimate cool, the Nibbana cool. Pun intended. And so it's all intertwined. And we have here, a few interactions. Well, we have Hassan, who has seen Bante's replies on Reddit. Apparently you're active on Reddit, Bante.
Yes, on and off. I spend time on the Buddhism Reddit.
Great. So aside from YouTube, Discord, you can also find Bante J on Reddit. That's great. Yeah. Many opportunities to listen to the Dhamma. And Kevin says, I came to know the real Dhamma by way of secular Buddhism, so I'm grateful for it, but it's tricky to not feel judgment towards it. Do you have any reflections, Bante?
Yeah, again, I reflect often on how Buddhism will grow in America, in the West, and I think it's just going to be as diverse as it has been in all the different Buddhist countries. It's going to change and adapt, and I think there is always going to be a more secular aspect in some circles in the West, and I'm kind of okay with that. And you're a good example. You started in secular, and now you've you've made the jump. You've gone deeper. You've gone to the root. You've gone to the origin, and so it's a good place. There's lots of different ways that people make their way to Buddhism. Like even like I remember having this thing, Alan Watts, he's not a Buddhist. What was he, some hippie from the 60s? And then when I, moved to Bhavana and I became a monk and I started, meeting thousands of people, I realized how many people became Buddhists through first learning about Buddhism through Alan Watts. And it's like, oh, okay. That so it's I think it's a good thing in general. I think it's a good thing. Whatever brings Buddhist principles into the wider culture is a good thing in general. I don't have any what would you call, like, utopian hopes that, like, within 200 years America is going to be like 50% Buddhist people. that's not how it's going to be. Maybe 1,000 years, I don't know. But I think that there's going to be a diversity of ways that it unfolds, and I'm okay with that.
I'm more optimistic. I think 90% Buddhist. We'll see. Yeah, but I think getting to your question, it's tricky not to feel judgment towards it. Yeah, I think you already know what you need to work on. So essentially being grateful for anything that leads you to the Dhamma, that's great. I'm actually also grateful for a lot of bad things that happened to me right before I actually went to Bhavana Society. So have nothing to do with the Dhamma, but actually I'm grateful in hindsight in the way that it sort of sped up my dispassion towards material things. And I was like, oh, I actually have that longing of going back to that Buddhist monastery, which was in Italy, the first one that I went. And then thanks to that longing, I actually found Bhavana Society. So yeah, the tricky thing is not to be judgmental, but that doesn't mean that one cannot be critical. So we tend to think that either we have, we're judgmental, or we have zero opinion. And when we have zero opinion, or we are like, everything is okay, everything is great, all roads are equal, or whatever, then we're actually being, the true Buddhist. But actually, we can be critical without being judgmental. So we can, discriminate what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, and take the wholesome and dispel the unwholesome. And see it not only in what we find outside, but also in how we are approaching practice. Because really, realistically, the majority of the delusion is in our mind. Other people, there always exist, like whatever, secular, non-secular, this idea, this other idea. I mean, if you see 2,500 years of Buddhism, of history of Buddhism in Asia, it's not that everyone has impeccable right view. I wish that then we would have like incredible enlightened beings, every corner of the street. More enlightened beings than Buddhist statues, than in Asian countries, but it's not. So obviously, it's a practice, it's a path. So the point is, to really question our assumptions of enlightenment. Like, as in the Zen tradition, they say, when you think you've seen the Buddha, kill the Buddha. That doesn't mean like actually like kill the Buddha literally, but rather our concepts of enlightenment, our preconceived ideas of what the Dhamma is. Like, this is true, this is not true, this is provable, this is not provable. Like, all these preconceived ideas that are sometimes culturally arisen, sometimes just whatever, our mind just works in a very abstruse way. So we just believe things just because we think that it's true for no reason, or because someone that we like told us that, or like, oh, Bhante J is cool, he told me this thing, so I'll just believe in it. Whether it's true or not, we just don't question it, or our parents told us, or whatever it is. So actually, the Kalama Sutta that Bhante Suttaso, before he felt sick, was supposed to talk about today is really kind of delving into this topic deeply. So tune in next week for more on this topic. And actually, Kevin says this. I suspect that if monastics cease to exist, the Dhamma would first become secular, then financially corrupt, then non-existent.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting things happening, like with places like IMS and Spirit Rock having like lay teacher certifications and things like that. Although in a way it is kind of a good thing. At least they have some kind of training, I guess. But I also kind of think to be more positive, and I think what we see, at least again, I don't know Europe and stuff like that. What I see in America is that there's more demand than there's supply. And so because there's not a big supply of like, good monastic teachers, then it's filled in by a lot of lay teachers, and some of them are good and some of them not so good. But I think that as long as the demand is there, it's going to be met somehow. And so this is why I say that we need more good monastic teachers.
I agree with the good monastic teachers part. But we have plenty, I think. It's just that we don't know necessarily where to find them. But usually, actually, Sri Lankan temples are a very good place where to tap into. Usually, if you're, there's a lot of Sri Lankan temples pretty much everywhere in the US. And the monastics generally speak English. And they're very knowledgeable of the suttas. So I have 5 stars out of 5 Yelp review for Sri Lankan Viharas. And Niranjan says, respected bhikkhunis, so I guess they're addressing me. I think Dhamma, Megan's all natural law. Am I right? I think you're saying if the Dhamma is a natural law. Yes, absolutely. Actually, that's what we chant here almost every day. That whether a Buddha essentially comes to this world or not, the principles of Dhamma stay the same. So it's a natural law, just like gravity, essentially. So everything is impermanent, non-self, and dukkha, suffering, or unsatisfying, however you want to translate dukkha. It's a very difficult word to translate, actually, dukkha.
That's why I just don't. I like using the Pali word. Plus, it's a cool word to say, dukkha.
Yeah.
And it sounds like suffering.
Yes,
dukkha.
Exactly. And Paul actually has a question that is related to actually the next step of the sutta that we're reading. So I have a question in regards to Sila. I know that Sila is the key to keeping the Dhamma alive, but I always have struggles in the lay world. At times I wish to eat vegetarian, minimizing gluttony. Other times I hope to keep far away from intoxicants or staying away from the comfiness of couches and beds, sleeping, etc. Should I become fluent in one practice at a time or practice anything wholesome whenever it arises? So I think that this is a little bit related to they dwell without reverence and deference towards the training, and also a little bit towards heedfulness as well. Bhante, would you like to address that?
I'm just kind of clarifying exactly.
Well, I would say that the training, I mean, yeah, absolutely. So Sila is the beautiful gifts that the Buddha has given us. So a way to train the mind. So not only the theory, sometimes, like for example, so in Christianity, I grew up with really beautiful aspirations, like love your neighbor like yourself. And, you're like, yeah, I really want to love my neighbor, perhaps even more than myself. Then your neighbor is really unpleasant and starts doing really mean things. And you're like, well, this neighbor is really hard to love. How I can't even love them like the dog or the like it becomes actually quite hostile. I can't even not hate them. So the Buddha is very skillful, I feel, in giving us precepts both to monastics and lay people in training the mind. So it's not that we're like already like, okay, be compassionate or be loving, but rather stop harming. Right? Stop killing, for example, all sentient beings. So you stop continuing, persevering, the habit of those of hatred, of ill will, and then create room for compassion and for metta to grow. Also, not stealing. Rather than, there's not the precept of giving everything away, right? There's the precept of not stealing. So by not accumulating, by not taking what is not given to you, then you start loosening that tendency towards accumulating or craving things all for yourself. And so this is interconnected, right? It's trainings that apply for both monastics and lay people. And obviously we have the most compassionate training as monastics, because the Buddha then goes into detail and like it's hundreds and hundreds of precepts, right? And it's actually a good thing. It's not a privation. It's not a like, you are terrible, but rather it's actually great. Great things to practice. So you have more opportunities to develop actually heedfulness, to develop awareness. So with all these precepts, some are, as I was saying earlier, precepts that we do that create the means for compassion, so that we start caring about lay people, we start caring about sharing the Dhamma with others that don't wear robes and that don't live like us. But others are just simply, practices of mindfulness, of always knowing, for example, where your robes are so that you don't leave them here and there. And and they're actually revolutionary when you start practicing them. And so this is, I think, the reverence and deference that the Buddha talks about. So not taking them just like, oh yeah, like I go to the temple and I do my little chant and then I go out and I get all completely wasted and and I start stealing and I start doing sexual misconduct and everything else, and then I am pure for 3 hours a week. Well, better than zero, I will say. If you do it for 3 hours, better than zero. It's a start. But yeah, doing it with understanding that it's actually a gift. So when people give you a gift, you don't throw it away, you don't misuse it. You're like, wow, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for this. But what is this gift all about? How can I use it? How is it beneficial for myself and others? And
I was just really, I don't know, when Paul says, should I become fluent in one practice at a time? Or I don't know if he's meaning like, should I become fluent in one precept at a time or something like that? But yeah, as I said, that the Buddha calls the precepts 5 faultless gifts to the world. So it's something that you do. And if you look at the precepts, they're pretty much all, the 5 precepts, they're pretty much all connected with how you engage with the world, right? There's no precept that's just really about you. If you do the precepts, you're harming another being. You're harming yourself too, but you're also harming somebody else. So it's how you engage with the world. And it's a practice of letting go. You don't have to, you can just be totally hedonistic and kill and steal and sleep with whoever you want and do whatever. But if you're choosing to live by virtuous principles, then you're letting that go. You're actually restraining yourself. Restraining yourself is letting go, because you could be, like when people go to the monastery on the weekend instead of going to party for the weekend, that's a restraint. That's doing something. They could be doing all kinds of stuff, but they're doing this. And so, in terms of the precepts, if this is what you were getting at, Paul, what I would say is try to live by at least the 5. And if I think somebody has a question about the 5th precepts, and if you can't do 5, then try 4. And if you can't do 4, then do 3. If you can't do 3, then do 2. But the best is to try to do as much as possible, right? To try to live and to really, when you take it on that, okay, I'm going to try to live by virtuous principles, then it's like you have a system, you have a toolbox. And then when something arises, then you see, okay, how should I act during this situation? All right, what does the Buddha say? What are the principles? What are the principles that I'm living by that I apply to this situation? Because the world is lots of, there is black and white, but there's a heck of a lot more shades of gray in between. Right? And nobody, if somebody wanted to try to have you live by virtuous principles in every aspect, then it would be like the 5 bazillion precepts instead of just the 5 precepts.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of take these principles and apply them to your experiences in life so that you can engage with those experiences in the most skillful way possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bante. And yeah, I would not start with the 8 precepts if you haven't mastered the 5 yet. So a gradual practice is always good. And if you have problems with the 5, definitely start with staying away from intoxicants, because usually that weakens the willpower to keep the rest of them. Yeah, definitely not killing human beings. That is good. But also then extending it to all sentient beings and really seeing how this affects your mind and congratulating yourself. You've mastered 1 day of not killing any mosquitoes. Wow. You're better than 99.9% of the human population on Earth. That's a big pat on the back, right? It's not something, to overlook. And in terms of vegetarian eating, we tend to, especially in the West, we tend to be very kind of analytical about it. And what I really like is actually this quote of this, I don't remember, it was a Tibetan Lama, but he suggested to pay attention rather than what we put in our mouth and what comes out of our mouth.
Yes.
Which is why actually the particular food that one is eating is not neither in the 5 precepts nor the 8 precepts, but what comes out of our mouth is in fact in the 5 precepts. And Hassan says, I have a question regarding the 5th precept, not taking intoxicants. If somebody's taking painkillers, which make the mind numb due to chronic pain, does that qualify as breaking the precept?
No. So, as an example, you get into an accident. Somebody gives you opiates. You take the opiates because of the pain. But then you recover and you still keep taking the opiates. There's been a switch. The first part, you were doing it for medical reasons, and then you've turned it into what they call recreational reasons. That's when you've gone into 5th precept territory. Same thing with marijuana. Again, marijuana is really good for like cancer patients and people who have all kinds of sicknesses, and so they can eat. There's lots of medical good reasons. But when you switch to recreational, then you're getting into the 5th precept. So if it's for legit medical reasons, either for from a doctor prescription, or you really intentionally, you can see in your mind that you really are just using it for medical reasons, then it's okay. But you have to be tricky, because your mind fools you. It's Mara in there saying, you can use this. It's for medical reasons. But then you realize that, no, Mara, I see you. Right? This is not. And then, so, there's a line, and you have to realize when the line is crossed.
Yeah, thank you, Bante.
Mm-hmm. And also, Hassan, I saw Hassan ask about the Discord. Hassan, send me an email And I'll get you on the Discord.
Oh, I didn't see it.
This was a while back.
Okay. Sorry, Bante.
No worries.
I missed it. Yeah, you're also welcome to write to Empty Cloud if you can't find directly the email of Bante, and we'll send you all the information. And Paul says, I found that restraint is a language that we may not be as fluent in as we initially assume as practicing Buddhists. This is why I love Theravada and the specific restraints that the Buddha laid to. Yeah, of course, nobody wants to get restrained because we're addicted to suffering. We are addicted to craving. So, yeah, it's the vipallasa, essentially, the distortions that we have. We find what is actually suffering. We think that it's sukha, right? We take the dukkha as sukha. We take the ugly as beautiful. Yeah, right? The asubha as subha. So it's really counterintuitive. That's actually, I think, the other question that you had asked earlier. What was our experience with keeping Sila strong? Was actually realizing that, how counterintuitive the Dhamma is. And there were some things, that I was like, yeah, I can, like, I'm following here. And some others I was like, no way, this is crazy stuff. So I would actually go, yeah, the Buddha is wrong. I'll keep on practicing my way, or I'll do it this way. And then I would have to face the reality that I was attaining suffering. So then I would go like, okay, let me take it as a working hypothesis, even though it sounds completely crazy. That I will be happy by, not hanging out with the people that I like and not getting the things that I want and not having the food that I like. Like, this sounds completely awful. How could it ever lead to happiness? And then actually I was happier. So that's why the Dhamma invites you to come and see for yourself, because intellectually it's completely illogical. Not because the Dhamma is illogical, because we have trained our minds to be illogical. So then we start reprogramming the mind, and we're like, wow, instead of the fear of missing out, I'm experiencing the joy of missing out. Now I'm seeing this anxiety of constantly, like, the best, the new, like, I used to work in fashion. So as soon as you get a bag, there's another new one that just came out. It's like, already you can't even have like a moment of sukha, right? Like, before they had 2 collections and 4 collections, then they started doing the pre-cruise and the cruise and the whatever. Like, it was, yeah, from 4 seasons it became 20 seasons. Like, you couldn't even go a day without like a new season of things coming out. So it's so much anxiety that pursuing our craving brings to the mind, so much suffering. But then when we let go, this is some coolness, extinguishment of this fire that keeps on burning. And we keep on being so itchy. But we only have 5 minutes left, so maybe we can talk about dwelling without reverence and deference towards hospitality, so we get it done. So Bante, would you like to share something on that?
Hospitality. That's I'd almost want to like check what the Pali word means for that, because it's interesting, because hospitality can mean a lot of different things, and it could mean like supporting the Sangha. It could mean being open to, it's like, the tradition in India of supporting sadhus as they were wandering and, stuff like that. And I guess it could be connected to that of,
I don't remember the Pali term, but I seem to understand that, like, my understanding when I hear the Buddha talking about hospitality is, once again, both for monastic and lay people. So actually, we were talking about Uga, the householder, earlier. So essentially cultivating that mind of caring, of loving kindness towards others. So towards seeing everyone as essentially your mother and your father, your brother and your sister, and really developing a caring mind. So we have rules as monastics where, for example, they're completely arbitrary based on seniority and whether you like it or not. Sometimes, obviously, if you have a senior Ajahn that have perfect conduct, your mind naturally, if you have a minimum of good karma, your mind naturally gravitates towards like bowing, being respectful, caring for them. But then some others, they might be significantly more senior than you, and then your arrogant mind comes in, and you're like, well, they can take their own wash their own bowl, or they can wash their own things, and once again, we start practicing in that discriminating in an individual way rather than understanding that the reason why we are practicing these things are first and foremost actually for our benefit, to be quite frank. So to create a mind that has, once again, the ornaments of mind that we were talking about earlier, but also that then are conducive, qualities of mind that are conducive for us to associate with enlightened beings. Because enlightened beings will not hang out with, untrained, body, unpleasant people. And we can see it even unenlightened beings, actually, as we are practitioners. When we go to the temple where we tend to gravitate towards the nice ones, towards the ones who have a mind of loving kindness. And we appreciate those qualities in others. Maybe we haven't cultivated them ourselves, but we're like, oh, that's nice. We don't want to hang out too much with the dosa types, even if we're dosa types. We're like, no, I'll go with the metta. I'm speaking as a dosa type, right? Actually, if you're a dosa type, there's nothing that you hate the most than other dosa in others. So you want to emulate what is there in similar lay people. So the Buddha actually encourages, one thing that I noticed is that we all tend to, whether we're ordained or not, to kind of do the work of others. So I remember talking to this lay person in Italy, and they were like, oh yeah, I like to make food that is not really that great for monastics because monastics need to suffer a little bit while they're practicing, because if everything is too pleasant, then they will practice greed, etc. I was like, that's not your job. That's really not your job. Your job is to, once again, make merit by creating, wishing for others to experience the best. Then the monastic, and I was like, I'm a monastic, and I can assure you.
I've also heard people the opposite. They will give like a monastic like the most rich or the most thing, and they'll look. It's like, are they eating the Haagen-Dazs? Like, what are they doing? Or did they choose the more rich thing over the the more plain thing?
Yeah, looking with a faulty mind. Yeah. Because once again, we're trying to do the work of others instead of focusing on our job, which is whatever our job is. So being nice towards others, cultivating metta, cultivating a mind of loving kindness. It's so much easier to do the other's job. The judging mind, right? Anything else that you would like to share about the hospitality?
Oh yeah. Well, I was thinking, and when I flip the word to hospitable, then it makes, so being hospitable is being like open and welcoming, and I can see that both in the aspect of between monastics and laity, but I could also see it in terms of the aspects of growing those who are practicing Buddhism. Like if there's people on the outside and they come across Buddhist people who are very kind of open and welcoming, then that's kind of conducive to them, seeing the goodness in the assembly and wanting to learn, wanting to listen.
Absolutely, yes. I have to say that actually, I think one of the things that I loved the most when I encountered Buddhism was actually the lay people. The monastics too, actually. Monastics, the foremost, the senior ones, obviously, like meeting Bhakti Gunaratana, but also the incredible hospitality, of Asian Buddhist-born lay people that, I was a random person who came and I was confused, and actually possibly people could have thought at the very beginning I was disrespectful because I wasn't bowing, I wasn't partaking in things that now I find valuable. So I was actually a little bit skeptical. I remember I met Bhante Jay before he was Bhante Jay, and he was an Anagarika there, and and at the monastery, and I was like not bowing, not doing anything. You told me that it was okay though. But yeah, he was very hospitable. So understanding that I had my limitations and going like, yeah, it's okay. And people were not judging and very welcoming and still actually giving me food. Yeah. So how remarkable that is, that it's kind of embedded in the culture. So that's also something really humbling of the Buddhist tradition per se, which is not necessarily just people in robes, but rather, the fourfold assembly. Each one has a role, and it's a beautiful role. And without these roles, then there's a lot of, we just have a bunch of doctrine, I would say, that then can be very difficult to practice. All right. So, any last remarks, Pante?
No, all good.
All right. And thank you all, friends, for joining us this evening. We're 3 minutes out of time because Bante Sudaso is not here. And I'm Italian and he's of Italian descent. So, got the cultural stereotype very well done. And we can end with 3 sadhus, and we'll meet again tomorrow for Sutta study at 8 a.m. New York City time. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. You be well and happy, and may all good things come to you.